Have you ever been looked down on by your own family just because they couldn't see your true worth? They called you a dreamer, unrealistic, the little sister who never grew up, until one day, they accidentally discovered you were sitting on more than $15 million and had built an empire they never even imagined. My name is Harper Greene. I'm 33 years old, living in the attic above an old antique shop in Savannah. To them, I'm the oddball sister, the one who sells used stuff for a living, always wearing worn-out jeans, scuffed-up sneakers, and bringing little recycled paper gifts to holiday dinners. What they never knew was that I turned my passion for forgotten things into a multi-million-dollar business. They didn't know I saw value in every item the modern world had rushed past. They especially didn't know that, in silence, I became the wealthiest woman in the entire family and the only one who never bragged about it. That was until last Thanksgiving, when my sister borrowed my phone while we were waiting on the turkey and saw a message pop up. Just one line of text. But it blew up the entire dinner and flipped the power dynamic in our family upside down. If you've ever felt underestimated, if you've ever sat at the far end of the table because your choices didn't match their expectations, if you're living your truth but constantly misunderstood by the world, then this story is for you. Listen all the way through, because I'm going to tell you exactly how I turned silence into strength and what it really costs to be yourself, even when it means losing your family. I'm Harper Greene, 33, single, no fancy degrees, no shiny house, none of the things my family uses to measure a person's worth. I live in a small attic above my antique shop in Savannah, where the floorboards creak with every step and the windows are so old the winter wind whistles through the cracks. But to me, it's the only place in the world where I feel free, where I can be myself without judgment or pressure to fit a mold. My family is different. They live in a world of spotless white walls, European kitchens, formal dinners, and conversations filled with GPA scores, job titles, and the latest profitable investments. In that world, someone like me is just a temporary failure, the quirky little sister who needs to get real. Every year, I show up for Thanksgiving like a stranger in my own bloodline. I bring homemade cranberry bread, a few antique books for the kids, even though I know they only care about their iPads. I come prepared with smiles and small talk. Work's fine. Shop's still open. Yes, customers still come. That's it. Nothing more. I give them just enough, but never the truth about the life I've built behind that old wooden door. I've done this for 8 years. Played the role of the sweet, odd, frugal but resilient girl. And deep down, I kept hoping that one day, just one, someone might actually ask, "Harper, what are you really doing? Are you happy?" But no. Every year, Emily takes center stage, talking about her law firm, million-dollar cases, luxury vacations, then circles back to brag about Max and Ava. And I help Mom peel carrots.
Weź dishes.
Sit quietly and listen. I've gotten good at being invisible, at making my presence feel weightless. Which is why when my sister picked up my phone and her expression completely shifted after just one message, I knew. That tiny world I had fiercely protected, the one where I was successful, respected, and in control, had just been pulled into the spotlight, right there in the middle of the kitchen. And for the first time ever, their eyes didn't hold pity. They held shock, then suspicion, then greed. In a single afternoon, I went from the overlooked little sister to the unexpected center of attention. But the price of that recognition was coming, and it would not be kind. I knew that moment would change everything, but I didn't expect it to happen so fast or so ruthlessly. When Emily looked at me, her hand still gripping my phone, her voice had shifted. Gone was the usual sarcasm she used whenever she called me the girl who sells old junk. In its place was panic, laced with something almost like anger, as if she'd just been betrayed. She asked what the message meant. My mother's eyes darted to me, still holding the gravy ladle. My father lowered his wine glass, waiting. No one said a word, but the kitchen suddenly felt like a walk-in freezer with the door wide open. I stood still, heart pounding. I had braced myself for the day the truth would come out, but not while wearing the faded sweater Mom once called outdated, not while chopping celery for the stuffing. Emily didn't let go of the phone. She read the message aloud, clear as day. "Congratulations on crossing $15 million. Your multi-sector investment strategy is performing remarkably well. Let's reconnect after the holidays to discuss the next real estate acquisition." I didn't need to look up to know, every eye was on me. I could feel the shock in the silence, in the breathless space between unspoken words. No one asked if I was okay. No one said congratulations. The first question was, where did that money come from? Was I involved in anything illegal? Was I laundering money? What stunned me wasn't the suspicion. It was how quickly they assumed my success couldn't possibly come from hard work or intelligence. In their eyes, I was still the misfit little sister, incapable of building anything big unless it involved cheating or dumb luck. I wanted to speak, to tell them I'd spent nearly a decade studying, searching, valuing investing, that I'd closed hundreds of deals, from dusty attics to curated galleries in New York. But my throat closed up, not from fear, but from a painful realization. They never truly wanted to know who I was. And if I told them now, the only thing they'd see was the number, not the person, not Harper. Just $15 million with a voice, a phone, and probably a wallet they'd like to open. I clenched my fist and gave the first answer I could. No, I'm not laundering money. And yes, that's my money. Every single dollar. The moment those words left my mouth, I knew this Thanksgiving was no longer a family dinner. It had become a battlefield. And I was the target. The air in the room froze the moment I finished speaking. My mother set the gravy pot down on the table, but said nothing. My father stared at me like he was seeing his youngest daughter for the very first time. Emily still had my phone in her hand, and her face had shifted from shock to anger, sharp and unmistakable. She spoke, her voice low and cutting like a blade. $15 million, and you didn't say a word to your family? Were you just going to let us all believe you were broke forever? I clenched my fists. No one ever thought I was broke. They just never bothered to ask. My father stepped in, trying to sound calm. How did you make that kind of money, Harper? I mean, really? His eyes searched mine. That little shop of yours made all that? He didn't believe it. They still didn't. To them, my work was always just a hobby, a cute distraction. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I invest. I buy and sell mispriced antiques. I find treasures where others see junk. And I've been doing it for almost 10 years. No loans, no scams. Emily let out a cold laugh. And here I thought you needed help. Every year, watching you bring homemade bread and gifts wrapped in newspaper, I pitied you. Turns out you were living like that just to hide your money. I looked straight at her. No, I live like that because I like it. And because I knew that if I ever looked rich, people would start calculating what they thought they deserved. That's when my mother finally spoke, her voice soft but heavy. Harper, family, is about sharing. You could have helped so much if you had trusted us. I let out a bitter smile. I've always trusted. I just was never trusted in return. Silence wrapped around the kitchen. Outside, the oven still hummed. The timer still ticked. But inside me, everything had shifted. I wasn't the Harper they used to know anymore. And they weren't the family I had once hoped for, either. / Emily set the phone down on the table, but her eyes stayed locked on me, as if demanding a better explanation, or maybe a confession that would make all of this easier for her to digest. My father leaned against the counter, gripping his wine glass, untouched since the moment this all began. My mother took a step back, as if she needed physical distance to process who her daughter really was. Emily broke the silence, her voice laced with anger, but wrapped in a thin layer of righteousness. Do you know Sophia needs a summer violin program in New York? It costs thousands. And Max was just diagnosed. He needs specialized therapy. Meanwhile, you live like a hermit and let us all think you were struggling. Why didn't you think to share? I looked at her for a long time. I used to think she was strong, rational, grounded. But now, all I saw was a woman terrified of losing control. I answered, slow and clear, each word dropping like a stone to the floor. I don't owe anyone anything. Especially not you. And I have no obligation to prove myself to a family that's never valued me. My father stepped forward, his voice still calm but carrying weight beneath the surface. Harper, if you've been this successful, why didn't you tell us? You know your mother, and I have always worried about you. I turned to him, my gaze steady. Dad, every time I mention the shop, you changed the subject to Emily's latest case. Every holiday, you asked if I was planning to get a real job, even though I never asked you or Mom for a single cent. Sometimes, staying silent was the only shield I had left, not to be swallowed whole by your expectations and judgment. My mother began to cry, but it wasn't remorse. It was fear. She whispered, you kept all of this from us all these years. What if one day, we truly needed you? I looked at each of them, and it hit me with piercing clarity. This wasn't a family gathering. It was a trial. And I, along with my wealth, had become the witness, the defendant, and the treasure everyone suddenly wanted a piece of. I never imagined this day would come. The day the people who gave me life, who grew up alongside me, would look at me like a talking vault. Suddenly, their concern bloomed, not because I needed help, but because they'd just discovered I might be the answer to all their financial problems. Emily sat down, arms crossed, her voice lower now but sharper than ever. So what's your plan? Just sit on all that money for yourself? Not share any of it with your family? Do you even realize what people would think if they found out? I smiled. Not a sarcastic smile. The kind that comes when you've just learned the biggest lesson of your life. I replied, I stayed silent all these years to protect my peace. But if the price of that silence is being paraded as a failure, absorbing pity at every meal, then I'm done paying. I don't care what anyone thinks. And if this family believes that not giving them my money is some kind of crime, then maybe we don't share the same definition of the word family. My father slumped into a dining chair, tapping his fingers on the table with impatience. He said, without looking at me, you know this family's always cared about you. It's just you chose such a different path. We didn't get it, but that doesn't mean we didn't care. I nodded slightly. I know, but if your care only shows up when money does, then it's not care. It's a transaction. And I don't do business with blood. My mother lowered her head, wiping tears with a kitchen towel. Her voice was barely above a whisper. So you really don't plan to help? Not Emily, not the kids. I answered without hesitation. I love the kids, but I won't buy kindness with money. If after all these years people only see me because of a number, then that's not the kind of attention I need. No one responded. Not a word. Just the ding of the oven signaling the end of its cycle, echoing like a bell tolling for the moment everything broke apart. And no one in the room had the courage to try and put it back together. The room sank into a breathless silence. I stood there, surrounded by 3 people who shared my blood, but it felt like I was facing a tribunal. Every stare measuring me not by the years I'd lived beside them, but by the value of what I was now worth. Emily leaned on the table, her gaze slicing through me. So you're choosing the money. You're choosing to hold on to it instead of helping your family. You're choosing a bank account over blood. I didn't need to think. I'd heard enough. I answered, calm but certain. No, I'm choosing myself. After all these years of being dismissed, ignored, told my work was a childish hobby, today, I choose to believe I deserve respect without having to pay for it. My father slowly stood, his voice lowered, tinged with disappointment, and something faintly commanding. Harper, don't turn yourself into an island over a moment of pride. Family is forever. No one's forcing you, just right now we all need you. I looked at him for a long time, and for the first time, I said the words I'd buried through dozens of holidays. When I needed to be seen, to be heard, to be asked how I was really doing, no one here needed me. But now that I have money, suddenly everyone does?
No, Dad.
I'm not choosing isolation, but I won't trade my self-respect to hold on to something called family if it only functions when there's something to gain. My mother let out a shaky breath, not from heartbreak, but from the shock of hearing me say out loud what they should have realized long ago. I'm no longer the fragile girl chasing approval in their eyes. Emily spat each word with finality. If you walk out of here today without agreeing to help, don't expect to come back. Don't expect my kids to call you aunt. Don't expect an invitation to another holiday. I smiled, soft but resolute. Then congratulations. Because for the first time, I'm walking away without looking back. Not because I don't love this family, but because I finally learned how to love myself first. And with that, I turned and walked out of the house I once hoped would be my safe place. But now I know, safety doesn't come from blood. It comes from the courage to stand tall and defend your worth, even if it means losing the very things you once thought mattered most. The door clicked shut behind me, quiet, but with a finality that echoed louder than any slam. I didn't look back. I didn't apologize. I didn't say goodbye. My hands still smelled faintly of celery. My shoes were dusted with dirt from the rush, and my heart was pounding so hard it felt like every beat was knocking against my ribs. But I wasn't shaking. I wasn't angry. The only thing spreading through me was relief. I crossed the front yard, passing my car, an old hatchback parked awkwardly between 2 of the family's sleek SUVs. I used to be embarrassed by it. Used to park farther away just to avoid the comparisons. But now, I saw it for what it truly was, a symbol of freedom. It didn't need to impress anyone. It just needed to take me far away from this place. Driving back toward Savannah, the words from dinner replayed in my mind. If you really loved this family, don't expect to be invited back. Family is about sharing. What they didn't realize was that I had shared more than they ever knew. I shared my silence to keep the peace. I shared holidays where I always felt like an outsider. I shared every small, thoughtful gift chosen from the heart, even if no one ever really saw them for what they were. I shared everything except money. And because of that, I was branded selfish. I flicked on the headlights, turning onto the main road that led back to the historic district. The golden streetlights shimmered along the damp sidewalks of Savannah, like little stars meant only for me. I didn't know what would come after tonight. Maybe they'd cut me off. Maybe I'd become the villain in whispered family stories. But I knew one thing for certain. I had stepped out of the role I'd been cast in. No longer Harper the failure. Harper the pitiful. Harper the quiet. As of tonight, I am Harper, someone who lives by her own worth. And no one gets to take that away from me again. Back at my small apartment above the antique shop, I climbed the familiar staircase, but this time, each step carried a strange new weight. It wasn't the feeling of retreating to a hiding place after another exhausting holiday. It wasn't the quiet shrinking that came from biting my tongue through barbed comments and dismissive stares. For the first time, I wasn't running. I was returning to myself. I flipped on the lights. The room filled with the warm glow of amber bulbs and the familiar scent of aged wood, old paper, and a hint of dried mint. My space. The life I'd built. Not to prove anything to anyone, but to nurture the parts of me I once had to keep hidden. I settled into the armchair by the window, pulling out my worn leather journal, the one I always used to document rare finds. On the first page, still etched in faded ink, were the words, "Opening Day, Green Relics, a shop for the forgotten." I turned to a blank page and uncapped my pen. At the top, I wrote in bold, steady letters, "Asterisk after Thanksgiving." Then I began to make a list, not of rare artifacts or million-dollar deals, but of the things I had just lost and the things I had just reclaimed. Lost, the illusion that my family would love me for who I am. Lost, a seat at the holiday table I tried so hard to belong to. Lost, the hope of ever being seen through eyes of real recognition. Then I kept writing. Found, my own voice. Found, self-respect. Found, the right to live without asking anyone's permission to be myself. Beneath it all, I drew a long, firm line. A boundary between what was and what will be. Between who I used to be and who I'm becoming. I looked out through the window. The city was sleeping, quiet and gentle. And in that moment, I realized that just when I thought I had lost everything, I had found something far more precious. Freedom from the need to be accepted. And the beginning of a new life that needs no one's blessing. // I sat still for a long time, letting my thoughts drift like the soft breeze outside the window. Each gust carried a memory, an old conversation, a glance I'd spent years trying to decode. I used to believe that if I tried hard enough, loved deeply enough, and stayed quiet long enough, I would be seen, recognized. But no. To people who only believe in appearances, silent effort might as well be invisibility. My phone remained quiet. No messages, no calls,
no apologies,
and no new demands. That silence a year ago might have twisted something in my chest. But tonight, it only brought calm. Because at last, I no longer needed their reactions to define my worth. I stood and walked to the small table by the bookshelf, the one where I usually worked. An old map was already spread across it, next to a few drafts for an upcoming exhibition I was curating on the history of the American South. I smiled as I caught sight of my own handwriting, those meticulous notes I once feared no one would ever understand or appreciate. But now I understood them, and I appreciated them. That was enough. I poured myself a cup of tea and stepped out onto the balcony, where I could look down on the cobblestone street below, the warm yellow light spilling over the worn steps of centuries-old houses. Out here, no one called me a failure. No one asked how much I made. No one forced me to fit into their version of who I should be. Out here, I was just Harper. Nothing more, and nothing less. I took a sip of tea, breathed in deeply, letting the warmth travel from my throat all the way to my chest. Then I whispered to myself, for the first time without trembling, without needing permission, *I am enough. Asterisk, not because someone says so. Not because of what's in my bank account, but because I dared to live in alignment with who I really am. And I will keep doing so. Every day, one day at a time. No turning back. No shrinking down. Backslash, backslash, I set the teacup down on the railing, my hands still warm. In front of me stretched the quiet night of Savannah, gentle and honest, so different from the suffocating air I had left behind just a few hours earlier.
No clinking silverware.
No barbed words disguised as concern. Just the breeze weaving through worn-out balconies and the fading footsteps of someone passing below. I pulled out my phone and glanced at the missed calls. A string of numbers from Emily. One message from my mother. Just 3 words. Are you okay? No question mark. No follow-up. I read it again and again. Maybe she was worried. Maybe it was just politeness. But I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because I needed time. Time to separate genuine love from affection wrapped in conditions. I opened the camera and took a photo of the scene before me. The street lamp casting soft light on a weathered red brick wall, a few flower pots quietly hanging by the windows, and the gentle glow from my shop downstairs spilling into the street. A place that, for years, had made me feel lonely. But not tonight. I know the days ahead won't be easy. Emily might keep pushing. My parents might call again, saying things like, family is forever, while still refusing to face the truth. The relatives may talk, but this time, I'm ready. I will not apologize for succeeding. I will not explain why I choose to live simply. I don't need to prove myself to people who once chose not to see me. I closed my eyes, letting the wind brush against my cheek, and whispered to myself, a quiet affirmation. I am not who they think I am. And I'm no longer afraid of what they think. I am Harper Greene, a woman who built her worth from things others overlooked. And from now on, I don't need acceptance to know I am enough. Backslash, I stepped back inside, closing the balcony door behind me, but not my thoughts. Inside me was a silent storm. Not loud, but fierce. It swept away the falsehoods, the worn-out beliefs I had clung to for years just to feel less alone among my own family. I sat down at the wooden desk by the window. The small lamp flicked on, casting its soft glow across folders, old letters, and handwritten notes I used to track antique acquisitions. I turned over a sheet, an appraisal of an 18th century table I'd once discovered in an old church in Mississippi. I remembered the moment my fingers brushed its surface, how each carved line seemed to whisper a story that time had never quite erased. I had always believed that old things, when seen through the right eyes, could retell history, could reclaim their worth, and sometimes could even save what seemed already lost. I didn't just deal in antiques. I searched for value in what others had thrown away. Maybe that's why I once hoped my family would see the same in me.
But now I no longer need them to.
I opened my laptop. There was an unfinished folder labeled Green Legacy Initiative. I clicked it open. A scholarship fund for young people who wanted to pursue historical preservation, art, and culture. No GPA requirements. No prestigious pedigree. Just passion, and the kind of eye that could see beauty in what the world had overlooked. I began to type, line by line, word by word. I would use the money they called selfish to invest in a generation that knows how to love the truth, how to honor the forgotten. Not out of revenge, not to prove anything, but to give others what I once longed for, a nod of belief. A hand held out at the right moment. A voice saying, asterisk, you don't have to be like anyone else. You just have to be yourself. Asterisk, I paused, looking at the screen. The soft blue light shimmered in my eyes, for the first time in a long while, clear of fear. Only resolve remained. Backslash, backslash. I saved the draft and leaned back in my chair, my mind still circling thoughts. Not about my family anymore, but about all the others out there. Those who are like me. The ones who've sat quietly at holiday dinners, never asked about, never acknowledged, only used as background for someone else's story. I wondered if they were still awake, tossing and turning over an offhand comment from a relative. Wondering if they were somehow not enough just because they didn't follow the path someone else laid out for them. If so, I want them to know, I see them. I've been there. I, too, once believed that if I just tried long enough, everything would eventually change. But then I realized, not every mistaken gaze is mine to correct. Some views are meant to stay lost, as long as I don't lose myself trying to fix them. I stood and walked to the bookshelf. A small box sat between 2 antique novels. Inside were cards I never sent, gifts I once intended to give my family but hesitated. a vintage fountain pen for my father, a book on classical music for my mother, 2 small sketches for the kids. I picked up each one, studying them. Every item whispered what I never had the courage to say out loud. Asterisk, I wanted to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, without conditions. Asterisk, I didn't throw them away. I gently placed them back in the box and labeled it, unsent, not yet ready. Not because I was giving up, but because I had stopped trying in only one direction. When they're ready to know who I am, not what I'm worth, I'll be ready too. The church bell rang in the distance, striking midnight. Another holiday come to a close. But unlike years past, I didn't feel empty. I felt full, even if no one was here to celebrate that with me. I drew the curtains, turned off the lights, and stepped into my bedroom. Tonight, I'd sleep with gratitude in my chest. Not because of who showed up, but because I had the courage to walk away from what kept me small. And sometimes, in this life, that alone is a glorious kind of victory. The next morning, soft winter sunlight slipped through the curtains, laying silk-thin ribbons of light across the wooden floor. I woke with a strange sense of peace. No tightness in my chest like in years past, no lingering echo of cold words or the hollow ache of feeling unseen among those who share my blood. I brewed a pot of coffee, its rich aroma filling the small apartment, blending with the scent of old books and aged wood. Through the window, I saw an elderly couple walking hand in hand down the street, unhurried. A familiar feeling passed through me, not loneliness, but a quiet stillness I'd learned to love. My phone lit up with a new message. Not from Emily, not from Mom. It was from Amanda, a distant cousin in Portland I hadn't seen in years. The message was just 4 words. Asterisk, I heard. So proud. Asterisk, I laughed softly. Turns out someone had seen me after all, even from far away. I replied with a single emoji, a small star. No words. Sometimes, quiet acknowledgement carries more weight than 1,000 empty phrases. And in that moment, I realized something. Recognition doesn't have to come from family. It can come from someone who's watched silently from a distance, a grateful customer, a respectful colleague, or from yourself, when you finally look at your life and say, I did it. I opened the shop right on time, just like every other day. In the morning light, the green relics sign shimmered like it was brand new. A pair of tourists wandered in, map in hand, curiosity in their eyes. I welcomed them with the line I always used. Asterisk. Welcome to a place where everything has a story. Asterisk, and I knew starting today, I had a story too. Not one about money, but about a woman who was once overlooked, once silent, once dismissed, and who in the end stood tall.
Brave. Proud.
Whole. If you've ever been underestimated just because your way of living didn't match the crowd. If you've ever sat quietly at the corner of a table, waiting for someone to truly ask how you're doing, then my story is part of yours too. And if today you're standing at the edge, between pleasing others and being true to yourself, I hope you choose you. Not out of selfishness, but because you deserve to. Leave a comment if you've ever felt the same. Tell me how you faced that feeling of being dismissed. I read everything, and I'm here. Don't forget to hit like if this story resonated with you, and subscribe so you don't miss more honest, deeply human journeys like this one. Because sometimes, the right story at the right moment can change the way we see ourselves. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video, where the things that seem small might reveal something truly meaningful. /.